I had always imagined a quiet life in this house, just my mother and me, until my husband, Todd, abruptly shattered that vision. His words stunned me. "I'll cover all the monthly expenses, so I need you to leave," he declared, his voice sharp and unwavering. I stood there, bewildered, struggling to comprehend the sudden shift. The truth only became clear when my mother-in-law finalized the name change on the condominium contract. "My name is Summer. At 34, my life is anything but simple. My father, a skilled craftsman who ran a small-town workshop, named me after the season of my birth. It may seem ordinary, but to me, it carries the weight of his love." His polishing expertise was widely respected, and despite financial struggles, I cherished my childhood days spent playing in his workshop. However, hardship took its toll. The business declined, and during my elementary school years, tragedy struck. My father passed away in the back of the shop. To protect me, my mother moved us far from town, seeking a fresh start, but the years of strain wore her down, and by the time I reached high school, I had lost her too. Though grief threatened to consume me, I pressed forward, determined to honor my father's legacy. I dreamed of bringing his craft back to life, showcasing his skills to future generations. Juggling multiple part-time jobs, I secured scholarships and pushed through high school, eventually earning a spot in the local public university's engineering program. That was where I met Todd, a kind and supportive young man who saw my potential when others dismissed me. He never belittled me for being a woman in a male-dominated field. His encouragement fueled my determination. After graduation, we moved in together. Todd took care of household chores, offering unwavering support through my demanding workdays. 6 years passed, and at 28, I found myself ready to take the leap. I wanted to revive my father's workshop. Todd stood by me, encouraging my dream every step of the way. Marriage had always been in our conversations, but for me, rebuilding the workshop had to come first. Todd understood and waited patiently. To fund my vision, I turned to crowdfunding, using my story as a female engineer to gain traction. As society increasingly supported women in STEM, I carefully crafted my campaign, securing funding and assembling a dedicated team. After 4 years of relentless effort, I reopened my father's workshop. Determined not to repeat past financial mistakes, I introduced state-of-the-art equipment and designed a modern, efficient space. I wanted a workplace that was not only productive but also welcoming to women. The results exceeded expectations. The workshop quickly rose to prominence in the industry. Some dismissed my success as luck, but Todd knew better. He had witnessed my struggles firsthand. However, while my career soared, Todd stagnated. His peers advanced while he remained in the same position. Frustration crept into his words. "You're really lucky things worked out for you," he muttered one evening. "Maybe there's someone out there who's a better match for you than me." I reassured him again and again. His support had been instrumental in my journey. I believed in him, in us. To prove my love and gratitude, I proposed marriage. Todd was my anchor, the person who filled my life with warmth and kindness. I hoped marriage would ease his doubts, solidify our bond. With that decision made, we rushed to inform our families. Meeting Todd's family was an unexpected reality check. Their home was an aging wooden structure, its stability questionable. The moment his mother saw me, she remarked, "So you're the daughter of that wealthy business owner everyone talks about," her voice laced with skepticism. My past fundraising efforts and media exposure had painted a certain image of me, one that clearly clashed with their expectations. I had carefully chosen my outfit, aiming to make a good impression, but from my mother-in-law's perspective, I must have seemed flashy, even excessive. Her tone turned sharp, insinuating that I owed my success to Todd. Grateful as I was for his support, I couldn't ignore the underlying hostility. The tension thickened as I stepped inside their home. Todd remained silent, his expression unreadable. His father, dressed in worn-out clothes, shifted uncomfortably. "I'm sorry about the house," he mumbled, acknowledging its poor condition. "I know it's not what you're used to." Taking a deep breath, I braced myself. I had overcome so much to stand where I was today, but in that moment, I realized I was stepping into an entirely different kind of battle. One casual remark was all it took. Todd's parents exchanged glances before responding with thinly veiled hostility. Rich people have different ways of thinking than common folks like us, his father muttered. Makes real conversation difficult. Back home, I asked Todd about their views on wealth, and his answer surprised me. He explained that, since childhood, he had been taught to distrust the wealthy. Fancy apartment buildings were assumed to be built on corruption, and successful people were believed to have shady dealings. His parents warned him that rich people couldn't understand hardship and that he should avoid befriending kids from well-off families. Although I hadn't grown up wealthy myself, it was fascinating to see where their deep-seated resentment stemmed from. Even after all these years, Todd's parents remained against our relationship. His mother often accused me of making him do too much, while his father warned him not to let his wife run the household. These constant remarks chipped away at Todd's confidence. I had never pursued success to look down on others. I only wanted to fulfill my late father's dream. But despite Todd explaining this to them, my career became the defining factor in their perception of me. I made genuine efforts to communicate with them, to bridge the gap in our understanding. But no matter how much kindness I showed, Todd's father always dismissed me with, "That's just how rich people think." Over time, their words hardened my heart. Meanwhile, Todd spent more time at his family's home, especially as his father's health declined. The distance between us grew, though we still lived under the same roof. Our marriage had become little more than a formality. 2 years later, Todd suddenly announced that he was quitting his job. "I'm too busy with things at home," he said flatly. Fury bubbled inside me. A decision this big, made without a single discussion. By then, we had already lost any real sense of partnership. He claimed he was preoccupied with housework, but in reality, he was frequenting casinos and racetracks. When I confronted him, he scoffed, "If you're so bothered, just hire a housekeeper. We have the money for it. I'm not your servant." His words struck me like a slap. I was speechless. Not long after, Todd's father's condition worsened, and 2 months later, he passed away. Then, as if orchestrated, Todd and his mother showed up at my house. Without hesitation, Todd declared, "I'm going to live here with my mother, just the two of us." I blinked, trying to process what I had just heard. "I'll pay the rent," he continued, as if that settled everything. "So, I want you to leave." The absurdity of it all was staggering. "Wait a minute. Todd, can you even afford the rent?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Instead of answering, my mother-in-law exploded. "How dare you look down on us? I won't stand for it." Todd sighed dramatically. "I'm tired of being bossed around. From now on, I'm going to live my life my way." I stared at them, two people who seemed utterly convinced that they were in the right. Slowly, reality sank in. Dealing with them any further was futile. "Fine," I said, my voice steady. "I'll leave next month." My mother-in-law wasn't satisfied. "Next month? Can't you just get the hell out of here next week? My new life is waiting, and I've already arranged for my things to be delivered." I hesitated. The rush seemed unnecessary. I had just agreed to leave. But before I could say anything, she raised her voice again. "Someone as rich as you should just hire movers and be done with it, right?" She repeated her sarcastic remarks, reinforcing her belief that I saw myself as superior. At first, I had assumed that since I was the one who contracted this house, they would be the ones moving out. But my mother-in-law was adamant. "This house belongs to Todd. No matter how much you earn, that doesn't change." Her words carried an unmistakable message. My success meant nothing. I glanced at Todd, who stood beside her, smug and self-satisfied, and in that moment, I questioned everything. Why had I given so much of my time, my energy, my love to this man? Living under the same roof with them was out of the question. I wouldn't waste another second breathing the same air. "Understood," I said quietly. "This weekend, I'll arrange for the move and take care of all the necessary paperwork." Todd and his mother exchanged triumphant looks, as if they had won some long-fought battle. Without wasting time, I searched for a new apartment and hired a moving company. Between work and business trips, my days were filled with planning my departure. Meanwhile, Todd barely acknowledged me, spending his time sleeping or pretending I didn't exist. When the weekend arrived, He signed the divorce papers without hesitation, without emotion. His mother, meanwhile, finalized the rental contract, securing the house she had fought so hard to claim. And just like that, it was over. I couldn't help but wonder, did she truly understand the reality of a $66,000 monthly rent? With all the necessary paperwork completed, I walked away from the towering high-rise condo, stepping toward my new home, alone. My new apartment, a modest yet secure one-bedroom, was perfect for living independently. During the move, I discarded unnecessary belongings, clearing not just my space but also my mind. Decorating my new home to my own taste felt liberating. Slowly but surely, I adjusted to this new life, and thoughts of Todd and his family began to fade. Though I couldn't erase the past entirely, I reflected on everything we had been through, our struggles as students, when we supported each other through tough times. I had never imagined our relationship would end like this. But then, I learned something shocking. One day, I happened to run into an old university friend, who casually mentioned that Todd had been seen frequenting high-end city clubs. Later, a former neighbor told me they had spotted my ex-mother-in-law stepping in and out of a luxury foreign car, draped in fur coats, speaking with an air of importance. I was stunned. These were the same people who had scorned the wealthy, who had once sneered at me for my success. Yet, after I had walked away, they had transformed into the very thing they resented. Then, 2 months later, I received an unexpected call from Todd. His voice trembled with desperation, something I had never heard from him before. "I really need your help," he pleaded. I felt no obligation to entertain his problems, but curiosity got the better of me. "What happened?" I asked. He hesitated before admitting that it all started 3 months ago with a sudden phone call from his mother. "I hit the jackpot in the lottery, $30 million. Can you believe it?" she had screamed in excitement. Todd had been skeptical. "Are you sure? Is this real?" "Of course. I checked it over and over," she assured him. "We're rich now, Todd. No more looking up to those wealthy snobs. We can stand as equals, or even above them. This is God's blessing." Overcome with emotion, Todd had cried. Then she added something else. "Now, you're finally free from that woman's control. Did you hear? She's been running around with some young guy now. A woman like that doesn't deserve a place in your life." Her words ignited Todd's lingering resentment. "Now that we have real money, we don't need to be looked down on anymore," he had declared. "We'll never have to deal with her again." With their supposed fortune, Todd and his mother dove headfirst into luxury. They moved into an extravagant downtown high-rise, spending wildly. Todd drained his savings. His mother burned through her late husband's inheritance without restraint. Then, the day came to claim their winnings at the bank. But when they handed over the ticket, the banker's expression changed. "Sir, this ticket is from last year's draw." A heavy silence fell over them. Todd's mother had made a devastating mistake. She had compared last year's ticket to this year's winning numbers. Their so-called fortune had never existed. Even in the midst of their financial disaster, they still harbored the absurd fear that I would somehow take their non-existent wealth. Hearing all of this, I was speechless. "That's unfortunate," I said simply. Sensing I was about to hang up, Todd's voice suddenly sharpened. "But, we should be entitled to alimony, right?" I froze. "Excuse me? You were cheating, weren't you?" he continued, his tone grasping for justification. "That alone should mean we can demand alimony." I nearly laughed in disbelief. "Todd, you quit your job. You made that decision yourself," I said, my voice tight with anger. He ignored me. "But we have no place to live now. That condo. We can't afford the rent. You should take some responsibility." Something in me snapped. "You sleazy, pathetic excuse of a man, are you serious?" My voice rose. I had spent so much time holding back, swallowing my frustration, trying to be the bigger person, but now, I was done. Todd fell silent, stunned. "You never cared about anything but yourself. You pushed me out of my own home. You and your mother ranted about rich people, while scheming to live off money you didn't even have. And now, after all that, you have the audacity to ask me for help." Another silence. A deep clarity settled over me. Without another word, I ended the call. Their foolishness with the lottery ticket was astonishing. But it was no longer my concern. Days later, as I was arriving at my factory, I saw her. My ex-mother-in-law. She looked unrecognizably disheveled, her expensive coats and airs of superiority gone. Then, to my shock, she prostrated herself before me. "Please, help us," she begged. "We can't afford to return the $66,000 rent debt. Please come back, be a part of our family again." I stared at her, unmoved. "You knew what was in those contracts. You signed them. Did you really not understand how serious this was?" My voice was calm, measured. She trembled. "Please. I know we were wrong, but will you truly abandon a mother and child struck by misfortune?" I took a slow breath. "I believe that luck isn't something you wait for, it's something you build for yourself," I said. "Despite hardships, I worked to carve out my own future. Did you ever try to do the same?" She stared at me, stunned. I turned away, walking toward my factory. After a few steps, I glanced back. She was still there, frozen in place. But I never looked back again. I kept walking, focused on the path ahead. As expected, Todd and his mother were eventually evicted from their luxury condo. They ended up in a rundown wooden shack, their money gone. They spent their days working odd jobs, barely scraping by. Meanwhile, I poured myself into my work. My factory grew beyond its small beginnings. With steady funding, I acquired a larger plot of land and built a state-of-the-art facility. This new factory wasn't just about business, it was designed with families in mind, offering maternity leave and childcare support for employees. Though my parents weren't alive to see it, every time I saw a worker visit the factory with their children, I thought of my own childhood. And in those moments, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief and happiness. Because I had built something real. Because I had walked away. And I had never looked back.